On today's show, we'll be answering the question, was this the worst performance for the U.S. women's national team under head coach Emma Hayes? With me now is the newest addition of our athletic team, making his full-time debut on today's show. It's Henry Bushnell. Hi, Henry.
Hi, Jill. Appreciate you having me. How's it going?
Awesome. Can't say the same maybe for the U.S. women's national team, but I feel just fine this morning because I know that everything is going to be just fine because we're going to dive into that in just a little bit. But before we get into the match out of Chester, Pennsylvania on Thursday night, Henry, hello. Your first words are out for The Athletic, but this is the first time that our listeners and our readers can hear your voice. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, so I joined The Athletic. We're coming up on 3 months now, actually, maybe. But this past summer, I came from Yahoo Sports after covering all sorts of soccer there for a few years, and even other sports as well. But soccer had been my focus the past 2 years.
Thursday night, the U.S. women playing for the first time, we've said it 100 times, in 113 days, but we can't just chalk it all up to that. Okay, this game at Subaru Park in Chester, Pennsylvania, it started off great. You know, we get all this like Alex Morgan homage, the place where she scored her first ever goal for the national team. She'd go on to score 123 in total. But this game finished, it's taking the wind out of the sails a little bit. Portugal 2, Henry. The U.S. won. This was the third loss under Emma Hayes. Where did this game rank for you?
I mean, I think it's the worst performance. And, put aside the result, I think it's the worst performance of the Emma Hayes era so far. Now, that's largely because there have been a lot of good ones. But I mean, if you think back, it's probably the worst U.S. performance since that loss to Mexico in early 2024, like 6 months after the World Cup, when they're in the interim coach period. And yes, they also lost to Japan and Brazil earlier this year, and I think they got outplayed in both of those games. But it was Japan and Brazil, two really freaking good teams. And with all due respect and credit to Portugal, which Portugal deserves on the night, they're not quite at that level. And I think that's basically the conclusion that Emma Hayes and the players came to after the game. They credited Portugal, but it's the first time under Emma that I think there was real frustration, and the takeaway was pretty simply it wasn't good enough and we got to be better.
Portugal ranked 23rd. Where did this one go wrong? Because thanks to Rose Lavelle, it all started off so good. The U.S. goes up 1-0, and then that was kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many different ways you could approach the answer to that question. One, you could take it from that first minute and talk about the mental aspect of scoring a goal as a favorite so early in a game, and just what that does to your brain and your intensity and things like that. The other thing that Emma and the players really hit on was just that they were too often trying to solve problems as individuals rather than as a team. And when you do that, when one player says, I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to go close down this Portuguese midfielder that has too much time and space on the ball or whatever. But if 5 of your teammates aren't understanding that you're going to do that and anticipating that and know how to react and rotate and adjust accordingly, that's when you get a team that looks kind of disjointed. And I think that's what the team just looked really disjointed last night. And to some extent that's understandable because, as you said, they haven't played together in months. They had only just had 2 days in training. But I think that is really the problem. And then the interesting question is why? Was it just because they hadn't had time together, or are there deeper issues here? Are there tactical things? Are there personnel issues?
We talk about it all the time that this is a, quote, young squad. And I think before you get to a calendar year that is really going to matter and have massive implications like a Women's World Cup, isn't it safe to say no matter how disappointing the losses or who the opponent is, that teams have to just go through moments like this before you get to the big one?
100%. Yeah. And I think Emma had a quote along the lines of sometimes you need to kick out the backside like this. Those are her words. And yeah, it's totally true. The interesting part of this game was yes, it's a young squad. but she put on the field about as experienced a team as she could out of this group of players. Like Lindsay Heaps was in this team, Rose Lavelle, Sam Coffey, Emily Fox, Emily Sonnet, like players that have played at World Cups and Olympics, that you wouldn't expect to be so disjointed necessarily, and need like some sort of like learning experience like this. So I think that's where it's a bit more concerning, and that's where you get into questions of like, is this a midfield three that even works for the U.S. going forward, or do there actually need to be like more changes? And do we need to see more of the younger players as this team thinks about building toward 2027?
Let's talk a little bit about Portugal, where things went right for them and then where things went wrong for the US in defending set pieces.
So it's interesting. In the flow of the game, like there were some things that Portugal did that really frustrated the US. Like they played with this like midfield diamond in possession kind of, and the US just like couldn't really cope with it defensively. But when you boil the game down to why did the US lose this game, it's two set pieces, right? And that's like so uncharacteristic for this team. And like I was watching back the first one, and like it's really tough to figure out like what went wrong or what was even supposed to be the plan, and was this a issue of just a few players losing their mark, or Emily Sonnet kind of getting out jumped? Was it some sort of issue with how they set up to defend set pieces? I do think on that note, I thought Emma Hayes said something interesting after the game where she basically said like, I'm not too concerned about giving up goals on set pieces at this stage in the cycle. Like if we're giving up set pieces at the World Cup, then like, yeah, we got a problem. But that's the type of thing that you can it takes a lot less time to teach and learn how to defend set pieces and like figure out a couple like clever attacking set piece routines than it does to instill a whole like system of how you press and how you keep possession. So like that's what they're focused on at this point. I would bet that they're not training set pieces too much right now in the very little time that they have together. So I don't think it's a huge concern, but like, I mean, can you think of any time in the past that the U.S. women's national team has conceded 2 goals
No,
from set
emphatic
pieces in a game?
no. And perhaps that's the beauty in all of it, that it's just a one-off, and as they say, we'll call it stuff happens, and the team kind of moves on. There's a few players that I want to zoom in on coming into this window overall. It feels like the first choice goalkeeper is Fallon Tullis-Joyce. Does this do anything against her case?
I mean, maybe, and I do think that it's I think at this stage in the World Cup cycle, it is still an open competition. There is not going to be a number one.
Hmm.
I think that's the right way to approach it. I do still think she's the best and the most proven of the goalkeepers available, and I don't think last night really raised any big question marks about that. I don't think she was at fault on the first goal. Certainly, maybe on the second goal, you could nitpick a bit. Um, but the other part of it is like I think goalkeepers, like it's so easy for one mistake to change, or one goal to change our opinion of a goalkeeper, because the sample size of what they actually have to do in a game is often so small. Um, and also, like if you think, I believe she on the U.S. goal, she played a pretty darn good ball from back to front up to Alyssa Thompson, who flicked it on to Macario, and that's what led to the U.S. goal in 33 seconds. So it was, and she made a really good save actually right before the first Portugal goal that led to the corner that then Portugal
Hmm.
scored on. So I don't think it was all bad. I certainly wouldn't put it on her, and I think she is still
No.
she's the number one at this point. I would think.
Yeah, but that's our job here, to zoom in on
100%.
on players. If you had to give one player like their worst grade and one player their best grade, who are you kind of who are you handing those out to when you look at Thursday night's performance in the
That's
first
it.
game of what is 3 in this window?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think Emma said it after the game. Like, no player came out of this game with flying colors, or something along those lines. I actually thought, like, weirdly, Emily Sonnet was pretty good other than the two set pieces. Like in the run of play, she was all right. Emily Fox is always solid. Rose Lavelle was good going forward, but maybe part of the problem and the reason they didn't really have control of the game and struggled defensively. So I'm not sure there was really
That's fair.
one.
You can side with Emma here.
Yeah, I think I'll side with Emma here.
Okay.
Kat Macario was also, I thought, pretty bright. Going forward and had her moments and contributed to the U.S. goal. As far as the worst grade, like I'll almost side with Emma here too. Like I don't think it was on any. I mean, if we compare it to the standard that they usually set, I thought this was not Sam Coffey's best game. I think she's generally very good, and I'm a big fan of hers. But I don't think she played very well and was maybe at fault on the first Portugal goal, set piece defending. So that's one maybe I'd say because I generally feel very confident in her as a player and like her at the base of the U.S. midfield. So that's one I'll call out.
Okay, the last thing that happened in Chester, I talked about it at the beginning, is we'd be remiss to give all this love to just a gross kind of ugly loss against Portugal and not talk about the U.S. women's national team legend, Alex Morgan. I've loved all the fanfare we've seen from the club level to the national team over the last couple of months. It felt really special last night in Chester. I'd love to know your thoughts, Henry. What were your takeaways? I loved on the broadcast, they kind of like, we're going to give her like a Gatorade shower, but it was filled with her iconic pink head wrap. So it was just, I had all the Alex Morgan feels watching this one.
Yeah. And my favorite part actually wasn't the ceremony itself. It was arriving at the game in the 5 to 5:30 range, like 2 hours before kickoff. There were hundreds of people lined up at the gates, many of them like young girls, right? Because they wanted an Alex Morgan bobblehead, which were being given away at the gates, like to the first however many people who arrived. And then there was also, you mentioned the pink pre-wrap. There was a U.S. Soccer outside the gates set up a Alex Morgan pre-wrap station where
Amazing.
Fans, again, many of them young girls could go and get their pink pre-wrap in their hair.
Henry, did you do any pre-wrap or get a bobblehead?
I didn't think. Now you're making me regret it. I should have.
You should.
Brutal.
Yeah.
I should have thought of it at the time. I was too focused on just
On
getting
your
up.
job.
Yes.
All right. Well, fair enough. Henry, thank you so much. What a pleasure to talk to you. And we will just continue to enjoy everything that you're writing for The Athletic. Thank you so much.
The pleasure is mine.